My heart stopped as I pulled a crumpled condom wrapper from under the van's seat. But this wasn't just any trash. It was the smoking gun in the cold case of my wife's infidelity. There, among our vacation souvenirs, lay the undeniable proof of her secret life. How could the woman I loved transform our family van into the stage of her betrayal? Watch as I peel back the layers of lies and deceit that shadowed our shared life. I had my second cup of coffee, rubbing the stubble on my face, thinking about the tough job ahead. My wife, Debbie, and I had just come back from a trip to Yellowstone Park with another couple. We were so tired when we got home last night that we just climbed out of the van and went straight to bed. Debbie had to work on Monday morning, but I could sleep in. I don't start work until 4 p.m. We've been married for a year now, and it's been exactly a month since our wedding day. The trip was a sort of anniversary gift. Debbie had just earned 5 days of vacation, so with the weekend, we had 9 days to explore. We thought about starting a family soon and figured we might not get another long vacation for a while, so we grabbed the chance while we could. Our friends John and Kathy Harrison joined us. With 4 of us, we could drive non-stop and spend a whole week camping in the park. John and Kathy have a 15-month-old boy, and Kathy's mom could watch him for the week. I walked out to the driveway and opened the side doors of my 2-year-old Chevy van. Imagine how much trash 4 adults can make in 9 days. That's what I saw. John and Kathy had taken most of their stuff last night. Looking at the mess, I sighed and started cleaning. Our suitcases, a box of food, a fridge, camping gear, and a pile of dirty clothes were all still there. I took the suitcases inside. The dirty clothes went down the chute. I put the food back in the pantry and the fridge items back where they belonged. The camping and fishing gear went back to the garage. I looked at the makeshift bed in the van and decided to take out the mattress and vacuum everything. I grabbed the vacuum and a trash can from the garage, opened the back doors, and started pulling out the bedding. The mattress was custom-made and fit tightly. Suddenly, it slipped, and I fell as the mattress, bedding, and other stuff tumbled out. I got up, sorted the bedding to wash, and started filling the trash can with the mess. Among the trash, I found McDonald's wrappers, beer cans, crumpled napkins, and a condom wrapper. I stared at it, confused. It said Trojan Ultra Thin on the front. I knew something was off. I had cleaned the van thoroughly before our trip. Debbie had stopped taking birth control a month ago because we wanted to start a family. John and Katie were open about using birth control until their boy was 2. Maybe this was John's idea of a joke. He liked to prank after a few beers. I thought about it, then dumped the trash back out and started looking through it again. I found a crumpled condom under a napkin. This was no joke. I felt sick. Someone had used my van for sex, and it wasn't me. Debbie was the only woman at risk of getting pregnant. I sat down hard, trying not to throw up as I thought about our trip. The only time John and Kathy slept in the van was while driving. At the campsite, they slept in a tent while Debbie and I were alone in the van. We were always together except one day. I wanted to fish at a lake, but Debbie was tired and stayed back. John stayed with her to get groceries while Katie and I went hiking. We came back after 5 hours to find Debbie and John cooking and drinking. They seemed happy, and Debbie was tipsy. Katie seemed upset. John's drinking had been a problem before. Debbie was very affectionate that night. We were careful because John and Kathy's tent was close, and we slept with just a mosquito net on the van. The next morning, John gave me a smug look, and now I wonder if it meant more than I thought. I just found something shocking about your wife, and I can't believe it myself. Feeling sick to my stomach, I stood up and continued cleaning the van, but first, I put the wrapper and the used condom in a bag and hid it in the garage. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I wouldn't believe later that I actually found it. I didn't want to think about what it meant, so I kept cleaning the inside of the van and then started washing the outside. My mind drifted back to 3 years ago when I met Debbie. I was 20 years old, in my second year at Northern Michigan University, studying electrical engineering. I was doing well despite financial struggles. I didn't get any scholarships, so I worked jobs in high school and at car factories to pay for college. But money was tight, and I was considering dropping out to save up enough to finish my degree. I come from a big Catholic family with 3 younger siblings. They all went to parochial school, which was expensive, so my parents couldn't help me much financially. I was tired of the constant pressure from deadlines and exams and living with roommates, some of whom were difficult. It was Friday night, right after midterms, and some dorm mates and I decided to brave the snow and go to an off-campus party. It was a typical college party with a beer keg. Guys paid $5 and girls got in free. The music was loud, people were dancing and playing drinking games. I hadn't dated much in college because my studies and part-time job took up most of my time. What little free time I had, I spent playing sports like basketball and racquetball. At the party, after getting beers, I found my roommate Josh talking to a couple of girls. He introduced me to Miranda and her roommate Debbie. Miranda was pretty, but when I saw Debbie, I was struck. She was beautiful, with long reddish-blonde hair, green eyes, and a smile that lit up the room. Even dressed simply in jeans and a hoodie, she looked stunning. I was so caught off guard that everyone laughed at my reaction. I apologized and told Debbie she was the most beautiful girl I'd ever met, which made her blush. Josh mentioned Debbie and I were practically neighbors back home. We started talking and discovered we had mutual friends from high school. We talked for hours until Miranda reminded us it was getting late. Reluctantly, Debbie said she had to go. I asked if I could call her, and she gave me her contact, but joked about her long, German-sounding last name, Königsknecht, which had a funny family story behind it. "No kidding. Call me and we can chat more," she said, as Miranda tugged her towards the door. "You can count on it," I replied, watching them disappear into the night. The next day, I couldn't wait and called her back. We met for pizza a day later. It was a school night, but we spent hours talking about school, friends from home, and our families. After high school, Debbie's parents wanted her close to home, but she craved independence. She applied to several state schools and chose one 400 miles away. Debbie was studying marketing and had worked retail for a few years. She landed an internship at the retail company for the holidays. She managed her workload on a partial scholarship and student loans. She had an older sister and a younger sister. Her parents were paying for the younger one's high school, while the older one attended a public college near Detroit. That meant her parents could offer her little financial support. She shared that she was a cheerleader in high school but didn't continue in college. She loved swimming and had been a lifeguard at a local club for the last 2 summers of high school. Her parents were strict, especially about dating. Miranda told me through Josh that since coming to college, Debbie had made up for lost time. She went out with guys regularly, but nothing serious. I was eager to get closer to her. We started dating regularly for the rest of the semester. We always had fun. She was funny and interesting. We enjoyed college parties, had a few beers, and danced as the weather got warmer. It was different seeing her in tank tops and shorts instead of winter clothes. I felt unsure of myself. Debbie was stunning. She was tall and slim, with a great figure, while I was just over 6 feet, stockier, with brown hair and eyes. Despite being in shape, I wasn't standout. We dated until the semester ended, and I knew she was still seeing others. After our second date, we started getting more physically affectionate. I hoped this would make her consider just dating me, but she didn't stop seeing other guys. On our last date before the semester ended, we planned to meet up over break since we lived close. I shared that I might not return to school next year. At first, she seemed okay with it, but later she said she needed to study instead of spending more time together. I dropped her off at her dorm. She kissed me quickly and ran inside. I walked back to my dorm, puzzled about what changed. I tried calling her, but her roommate said she was out. I suspected she left with her parents. The next day back home, I started a new job at a factory. I tried reaching her through her parents in the evenings, but they always said she was out. I left my number but felt she was avoiding me, which hurt. About a week later, my mom handed me the phone saying it was Debbie. She apologized for missing my calls and hoped I wasn't upset. We caught up a bit. She then said she hoped I would ask her out again. I thought she didn't care, given the silence. "No, don't
think that, she reassured me. I was confused about you not returning to school, but I'd like to hang out again. That summer, we both worked days and started seeing each other a few times a week. I felt she wasn't seeing anyone else. I eventually met her family, and she met mine. Everyone got along except my older sister, who was a bit cold to Debbie. I didn't make much of it. We went to movies, enjoyed dinners, and sometimes had parties with our friends. We also visited Lake Michigan's beach a few times on our days off. Seeing Debbie in a bikini was a joyful sight. We had fun at the lake, and she laughed when my swim trunks got stuck, and I struggled to get out of the water. Each time we met, we grew closer. By the end of July, I decided I couldn't stay at my parents' house for 2 more years to save for school.
I was earning enough to afford a small apartment, mainly because I wanted to spend more time alone with Debbie. My parents were supportive when I moved out and helped me find some furniture. Just before Debbie returned to school, we had dinner and went back to my new place, knowing we'd spend the night together. We hugged and kissed deeply, then went to the bedroom. We turned off the lights and slowly took off each other's clothes. We embraced and kissed again, spending the night together. We were really close and even showered together to freshen up before being close again. For the next 3 weeks, Debbie came over almost every other night. Sometimes she told her parents she was staying with a friend and stayed till morning. Those nights were special. We talked a lot, not just about us, but about her life at college and her struggles with her parents' strict rules. When it was time for her to return to school, I felt really sad. The last night together, after being intimate, I opened up about my feelings. I told Debbie I loved her and wanted a future together, but felt unsure about her feelings. She seemed upset by the conversation and asked if we could just enjoy our time together without worrying too much about the future. Debbie looked away, and I felt she wasn't as committed as I was. She changed the subject, and although we moved past the conversation, it stuck with me. I realized she might not feel as strongly as I did. This made me sad, so I kept busy with work, extra jobs, and classes to distract myself. A few weeks later, a coworker mentioned he was selling his inherited house. It was big, but needed a lot of work. It was in a good area, though, and they were selling it cheaply. I saw it as a chance to own a home for less than my rent. The house needed major updates, but had great potential. After negotiating, I bought the house. I didn't tell Debbie right away because I wanted to surprise her, but she didn't seem interested when I finally did. I tried to get her to visit, and when that failed, I suggested meeting halfway. We planned a date, but she canceled last minute due to car troubles and bad weather. Disappointed, I focused on fixing up the house, hoping to make it a place Debbie would love. I worked with a carpenter from my job to design the renovations, dreaming of a home we could share. I started with the kitchen, planning to tackle the bathrooms and other rooms next. When the weather gets better, I'll work on the outside of the house. Renovating isn't cheap, especially for materials, but I saved a lot on labor. At the factory, we tradesmen help each other out. I do their electrical and general tasks, and in return, they help me with carpentry, windows, painting, and heating. A couple of weeks before spring break, I got a call from Debbie's dad, Carl. I stayed in touch with him and Debbie's mom, Angela, even visiting them after Christmas. They knew how much I cared about Debbie and shared my frustration with the long-distance challenges. Carl asked about Debbie's spring break plans. I was puzzled because I hadn't heard from her in a week and assumed she'd be coming home. He told me she planned to go to Corpus Christi with friends instead. I was surprised and asked what he said when she told him. He was disappointed she hadn't mentioned it to me. I felt really upset. It seemed Debbie didn't think she needed to discuss her plans with me, even though I had told her how much I was looking forward to spending the break with her at the new house I wanted her opinion on. I felt like she wasn't prioritizing our relationship. Carl sympathized, saying I didn't deserve to be treated that way. We ended the call, and as I sat in the kitchen I hoped we'd share one day, I realized that no matter how much you want something, it doesn't guarantee it will happen. It hit me that our relationship was mostly one-sided. I couldn't make Debbie love me as much as I loved her. Feeling a deep loss, like losing a close family member, I knew I had to accept it and move on. The next day, I found a message from Debbie apologizing and asking me to call her. Her cheerful voice made me think she just wanted to smooth things over about not coming home. I deleted the message and went to work. Another message from her sounded worried, mentioning her dad had told her about their talk. She wanted to explain, but I deleted that one too. A few days later, my mom mentioned Debbie had called asking for my new address, but was vague about why. I told my mom that Debbie and I were no longer together. My mom was shocked and concerned, and she invited me over for dinner to celebrate my upcoming birthday. My 21st birthday involved some coworkers taking me out, and it was a bit wild, but I managed. The next day, I had a nice birthday dinner with my family. My sister Angie asked about Debbie. She revealed she knew Debbie's sister from a youth group and had some insights from their conversations, explaining why she hadn't warmed up to Debbie when we started dating. I mentioned knowing someone who dated her sister but didn't say it was my brother. She told me a lot about Debbie, claiming she was selfish and always got what she wanted. Back in school, Debbie apparently had a lot of admirers and was always looking for more. Despite her parents' efforts to limit her social life, she often went out. I pondered this and then sadly said, "I don't know, Angie. I didn't see that side of her. All I know is that I loved her and I think I still do. But I can't continue this way. If she doesn't feel the same about me, it's probably best we go our separate ways." Angie gave me a hug, and we didn't talk further. The next week, Debbie's dad, Carl, visited my house. I showed him around and discussed my ongoing projects. He was impressed. "How much did you pay for this house?" he asked. When I told him, he was amazed at the potential value after renovations. "You just turned 21. It's a smart investment," he remarked. He then expressed how proud he'd be to have me as a son-in-law, acknowledging my hard work. I felt awkward, admitting, "Thanks, Carl, but Debbie and I didn't work out." Carl looked at me seriously. "I know, Dave, but we appreciated how you felt about her." He also mentioned he knew where Debbie was on nights she said she was with friends, implying she was safe with me. He regretted how things turned out, and as he left, he mentioned Debbie had made it safely to Corpus Christi. I continued my routine after that, working at the factory, doing house projects, attending college classes, and playing basketball. The effort helped me sleep better, but thoughts of Debbie still kept me awake at times. After her return from Texas, I deleted another message from her. When Debbie's birthday came, I debated but sent her a neutral card just to show I remembered. Then, on Memorial Day weekend, I was startled by a knock. Opening the door, I was taken aback to see Debbie. She looked shocked and explained she'd rung the bell but got no answer. I was in work clothes, covered in sawdust, and had lost weight from all the work and stress. I invited her in, turning off the radio to talk. She seemed uneasy but complimented the changes in me. Debbie mentioned her dad had praised the house during his visit. Curious, she asked to see the house. I gladly showed her around, explaining the renovations. The house was spacious, and I was converting it to have 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms with a remodeled fireplace in the living room. I showed her the oak beam that would be the mantel, leaning against the wall. The floors on the first level are all original wood, which I plan to sand down once I finish everything else. We walked through the dining room and I pointed to the blueprints on the kitchen table. A builder friend sketched out my plans for the house. I think it'll take over a year to finish everything. I led her to the kitchen, the only room that's completely done. It has new appliances, marble countertops, and new cabinets. It's fully painted too. "It's beautiful," she said, touching the marble. "Let's go upstairs and then I'll show you the backyard." We climbed the stairs and walked down the hallway. The master bedroom looks out over the backyard and has its own bathroom. I've replaced the toilet, sink, vanity, and bathtub. All that's left is the flooring and wall paint. We passed my bed with its old rustic bedspread. Next to my bed, there was a nightstand with a phone, a lamp, and a 5x7 photo of her that she gave me for Christmas. She looked at it briefly, then turned her attention to the bathroom. "Wow, a jacuzzi," she noted. I didn't comment on its size. Then I showed her how I planned to split the smallest bedroom to expand the master bedroom's closet into a walk-in and use the rest for a new bathroom. I showed her 2 other bedrooms, one empty and the other set up as my office with a sofa, a table, chairs, bookcases, and a small TV. We stood at the top of the stairs looking down into the living area, showing off the house's spaciousness. Debbie touched my arm. "Dave, this house is huge. What will you do with all this space?" I looked at her. "When I bought it, I imagined not living here alone," I hinted. She blushed and quickly changed the subject, suggesting we see the backyard and garage. We walked downstairs and out onto the deck through sliding glass doors. The deck, about 220 square feet over 2 levels, will have stairs down to the yard. "It'll have space for a grill, outdoor furniture, and even a hot tub," I said, adding that I plan to build a privacy fence around a large yard, maybe for a pool one day. At the garage, which is a bit away from the house, I explained my plans to add a workshop area. "Aside from that, there's also plenty of space in the basement for a game room," I mentioned. Debbie looked around thoughtfully. "You really take pride in your work," she said. "But how can you afford all this?" I explained that I do a lot of the work myself or trade services with friends, and I get discounts on materials. "I don't really spend on much besides this house," I told her. As we walked her to her car, she thanked me for remembering her birthday with a card. She hesitated before getting into her car. "Dave, my parents want to invite you over for dinner on Monday. It'll be just family and my sister's boyfriend." I thought it over. "Wouldn't it be awkward?" I asked. "No, Dave. It would mean a lot if you came," she insisted. I agreed to come and bring some beer. As she drove off, I realized I was smiling. On Memorial Day, I cleaned up and dressed nicely. Debbie warmly greeted me, kissing me on the cheek and leading me through the house. Her parents welcomed me like family. I chatted with her father about my house projects, and her mother chimed in occasionally. Her sisters were there too, offering their own insights and advice. Debbie was quiet, but her presence was comforting. We all enjoyed a great time together. Sarah and Debbie were helping with the food, and I noticed they occasionally glanced at me and whispered to each other. After dinner, we all relaxed, drinking beer and chatting. No one mentioned spring break or Texas. I asked Debbie if she had seen our friend Josh recently since we had lost touch. She mentioned she only saw him once last semester, but her friend Miranda sometimes met up with him. After a while, I felt it was time to leave. I thanked Debbie's parents, Carl and Angela, for dinner and said goodbye to everyone. As I headed to the door, Debbie said she'd walk me to my car. We walked together in silence until we reached the car. Then, Debbie suggested we talk a bit more at the small park nearby. It seemed like she had planned this, so I agreed, and we walked to the park. At the park, we sat at a picnic table. After a quiet moment, Debbie looked at me seriously. "Dave, I need to apologize for how I acted over spring break. I should have talked to you about it," she admitted. She explained that she avoided my calls because she didn't know what to say and was trying to make the most of her college years, thinking it might be her last chance to enjoy a trip like that. She acknowledged it was selfish. "I know I hurt you," she continued, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to push you away. I listened and then calmly said that it showed me where I stand and that it's probably best for us to move on." Debbie started crying, saying she didn't want things to end and that she missed me. "Debbie, we were never really together in the way I hoped," I explained. "You've always kept me at a distance, and it seemed like you valued your independence more than our relationship." She admitted she was scared of commitment and that being apart made her realize she truly loved me. I took her hands, telling her I never stopped loving her, but needed to know she felt the same. Debbie asked if we could try again. I thought for a moment and agreed, noting our differing work schedules but suggesting we try to make it work. The following weeks were slow, but soon we were closer than before. I tried to free up my weekends to spend more time with her. When Debbie started staying over on weekends, our relationship grew stronger. Debbie also got involved in choosing decorations for the house and started helping with some projects during the week. Sometimes she would even call in sick to stay over. As summer ended, I traded in my old car for a nearly new van. We used it to go camping along Lake Michigan. On our last trip before she returned to school, while relaxing on the beach, I proposed to Debbie. She was surprised but delighted and said yes. We spent the rest of the trip planning our wedding and future life together, deciding to wait until after her graduation to marry. We also talked about starting a family once Debbie was more established in her career. Before she went back to school, we went out to dinner with my parents to celebrate our engagement. 3 women, including Debbie, decided to meet on Christmas Day to plan their weddings. Debbie and I also agreed to set our wedding date by then. That night, Debbie stayed over and we talked into the early hours. We decided to meet at least once a month during the school year. I offered to visit her, but she preferred to come to our place or meet halfway. She planned to live off campus with friends, including Miranda. They found a house to rent, and her part of the rent was just a bit more than the dorm fees. She was tired of dorm life, and with her car, commuting to classes would be easy. The next day, I said goodbye as she drove off, feeling her absence immediately. Back to my usual routine, I focused on finishing the house renovations before our wedding. On weekends, I tried to relax and spend time with family. I often had dinner with my parents or Debbie's, alternating each week. Debbie's sister Sarah, who was in college and living at home, often joined these dinners. Debbie came home in late September for her older sister's wedding, where she and Sarah were bridesmaids. The wedding was lovely, and we enjoyed the celebration. In October, Debbie planned to visit, but a snowstorm and car trouble made her postpone. She wanted to reschedule for the following weekend after fixing her car. We met the next weekend in Mackinac City, spending a pleasant time sightseeing. Debbie seemed distracted, worried about school deadlines. At dinner, I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. She explained she took it off while doing dishes and forgot to put it back on, though she still wore the amethyst ring I gave her. Thanksgiving was wonderful. Debbie spent it at my place. We discussed her design ideas for the house, shopped for fixtures, and planned for her winter visits, which were uncertain due to her car troubles and heavy snow. Her father and I checked her car, deciding it was not worth fixing. I bought her a reliable Jeep so she could visit without trouble. Debbie, her mom, and I finalized the wedding plans. The church and reception were booked, and they handled the details. For Valentine's Day, we stayed at a hotel in St. Ignace, enjoying the snowy landscape from our cozy room. Plans changed when my work required me to attend training in California over spring break, clashing with Debbie's break. She was disappointed, and later asked if I'd mind if she went to Florida with friends. I expressed my discomfort with the idea, especially given our engagement, but she reassured me her friends would cover most costs. The conversation left me uneasy, feeling it was more about her plans than my feelings. I focused on my trip to California, which was busy and tiring, leaving little time for anything else. 3 women, including Debbie, planned to meet on Christmas Day to discuss their wedding arrangements. Debbie and I also set our wedding date for that time. That evening, Debbie stayed over and we spent hours talking. We agreed to meet at least once a month during her senior year. She preferred to meet halfway or come to our place since she was living off campus with friends, which was a bit more expensive than staying in the dorm, but gave her more freedom since she had a car. The next day, I watched her drive off, feeling her absence immediately. Back to my regular routine, I now had the goal of finishing the house renovations before our wedding. I tried to relax on weekends and often had dinner with my family or Debbie's. Debbie's sister Sarah was usually around too, making for lively dinners. In late September, Debbie came home for her older sister's wedding, where she and Sarah were bridesmaids. The event went smoothly, and we had a great time celebrating. By October, we planned for Debbie to visit, but a snowstorm and car trouble delayed her. She suggested meeting the next weekend after her car was fixed. We met the following weekend in Mackinac City, enjoying the sights and a day on Mackinac Island, even though Debbie seemed a bit distracted. At dinner, I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring and questioned it. She explained she'd taken it off to do dishes and forgot to put it back on, though she was still wearing another special ring I'd given her. Thanksgiving was lovely. Debbie spent it with me. We planned some house decorations and shopped for fixtures. As Christmas approached, Debbie mentioned ongoing car issues and uncertain travel plans due to heavy snow. Her father and I examined the car, concluding it wasn't worth fixing. I bought her a reliable Jeep to ensure she could visit safely. The wedding plans were finalized with the church and reception booked. I planned to attend her graduation despite her downplaying its importance. The graduation day was busy, with a seniors-only party the night before and Debbie busy until the ceremony. Most graduations are similar, speeches and diplomas. Afterward, families and graduates mingled outside the auditorium. We spotted Debbie among the graduates and celebrated with her, taking photos. She introduced us to her roommate Miranda, remembering past times. Miranda seemed distant and soon excused herself. As we discussed Debbie's upcoming role as maid of honor for Miranda, the mood was mixed. Afterward, we enjoyed a celebratory dinner and began the drive home. Debbie decided to spend the night with her parents, explaining she needed to spend time with them before the wedding. The weeks leading to the wedding were busy with final home projects. We were nearly done, except for sanding the floors. We looked forward to starting our new life together after the wedding. 3 women planned to meet on Christmas Day to discuss their wedding plans. Debbie and I set our wedding date for then. That night, Debbie stayed over and we talked until early in the morning. We decided to see each other at least once a month during her senior year. She preferred to meet halfway or come to my place. She was going to live off campus with friends, which cost a bit more than a dorm, but it was worth it since she had a car. The next day, I watched her drive away, already missing her. Back to my usual routine, I focused on finishing our house before the wedding. I relaxed more on weekends and often had dinner with my family or Debbie's. Her sister Sarah was usually there too. Debbie returned home in late September for her older sister's wedding, where she and Sarah were bridesmaids. It was a joyful celebration, and we all had a great time. In October, Debbie planned to visit, but a snowstorm and car trouble delayed her. She postponed to the next weekend after fixing her car. We met the following weekend in Mackinac City, enjoying the sights and a day on Mackinac Island. Debbie seemed a bit distracted. At dinner, I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. She explained she had taken it off to do dishes and forgot to put it back on, though she was still wearing another special ring I'd given her. Thanksgiving was lovely. Debbie spent it at my place. We planned some house decorations and shopped for fixtures. As Christmas approached, Debbie mentioned her car was still having trouble. Her father and I checked it out and decided it wasn't worth fixing. I bought her a reliable Jeep to ensure she could visit safely. The wedding plans were finalized with the church and reception booked. I planned to attend her graduation despite her downplaying its importance. The graduation day was busy with a seniors-only party the night before. We wouldn't see her until the ceremony. Graduations are usually the same, speeches and diplomas. Afterwards, families and graduates mingled outside. We found Debbie among the graduates and celebrated with her, taking photos. She introduced us to her roommate Miranda, whom we remembered. Miranda seemed distant and soon excused herself. As we discussed Debbie's upcoming role as maid of honor for Miranda, the mood was mixed. Afterward, we enjoyed a celebratory dinner and began the drive home. Debbie decided to spend the night with her parents, explaining she needed to spend time with them before the wedding. The weeks leading to the wedding were busy with final home projects. We were nearly done except for sanding the floors. We looked forward to starting our new life together after the wedding. They called it a networking event, but Kathy, John's wife, said it was just an excuse for them to drink and stay out late. As I sat there, lost in thought, I suddenly remembered something odd that happened last winter, just before I switched to day shifts. I was fixing some equipment at the auto plant when I noticed a group of men in suits and helmets walking by. One of them looked familiar. It was Josh, my old college roommate. I called out to him, and we were both happy to see each other. We didn't have much time, so we grabbed a quick coffee in the cafeteria. Josh explained he was now working as a manufacturer's representative for a company in California, but he was based in their Chicago office, and his job took him around Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. He was usually traveling from Tuesday to Friday, with Mondays spent in the office. We caught up on work, and I mentioned my plans to possibly go back to school, which made him laugh when I said my wife would have her say. Surprised, he congratulated me on getting married and asked when it happened. I told him it was last August and asked if he was still single, which he was, saying he was too busy for relationships. I reminded him that he knew my wife, Debbie, as she was Miranda's college roommate. Josh looked puzzled and asked if we reconnected after college. I told him how we dated during Debbie's last 2 years of school and got engaged before her senior year. Josh seemed taken aback and abruptly checked his watch, saying he had to go. I gave him my number, but after a few attempts to meet up, he always said he was busy and never called back. Now, remembering his reaction, I suspected he knew something about Debbie and was avoiding the topic. I decided to call him since it was Monday and he should be in the office. When I got hold of him, I asked to meet, but he was hesitant. I pushed, feeling he knew something about Debbie that I needed to know. Reluctantly, he agreed to meet the next day at a pub near the assembly plant. The next day at the pub, Josh arrived and we ordered food, but neither of us felt like talking at first. I decided to start by telling him about my life from when I met Debbie up to our marriage, detailing the happy times and the moments that now seemed suspicious. After I finished, Josh hesitated, then mentioned he still saw Miranda occasionally when she was in town for business. He had met her for dinner after learning about my wedding to Debbie. They said it was for networking, but Kathy, John's wife, thought it was just an excuse to drink until the bars closed. As I sat there, lost in thought, I suddenly remembered seeing my old college roommate, Josh, at the auto plant last winter. He was there on business, and we caught up over coffee. He was busy traveling for work and hadn't settled down yet. When I mentioned Debbie, he seemed surprised and then hurried off after our chat. Josh was shocked when I later told him about marrying Debbie. He tried to avoid meeting after that, but I finally got him on the phone and pushed for a meeting. He reluctantly agreed, and we met at a pub. Josh revealed that Miranda, Debbie's college roommate, had been upset when I mentioned Debbie. He accused her and Debbie of hiding something from me, and Miranda eventually confessed everything. Josh warned me that the details were pretty bad. During our meeting, Josh explained that Debbie hadn't been faithful. She dated other guys seriously at college even though she was with me. She told Miranda she enjoyed having someone who loved her at home and the freedom to do whatever she wanted when away. She even went to Texas for spring break with a bunch of guys, which she didn't mention to me. Josh also told me that Debbie and Miranda had rented a house near campus with their boyfriends. I was stunned when Josh said the guy who answered Debbie's phone when I called wasn't Miranda's boyfriend, but was actually Debbie's. They all lived together, and Debbie continued seeing other guys. I was devastated. Josh mentioned that Debbie had spent spring break in Florida, funded by one of the guys because they used the Jeep I had given her. He said that Debbie and this guy had been intimate during a party right before graduation. The realization hit me hard as Josh described how everything I knew was a facade. We sat in silence after his revelations. I felt betrayed and wondered aloud how I could have been so deceived. Josh suggested we keep our conversation between us as he didn't want to get more involved. We parted ways and I was left to ponder my next steps, feeling like everything I had invested in the relationship was based on lies. She usually was friendly, and we had gone on a few dates back in college. We even got a bit close once and stayed friends afterward. But when I mentioned I had met you, she suddenly became distant. I got upset with her and accused her and Debbie of trying to deceive you. She felt so guilty that she eventually told me everything. It turns out Miranda was the only one Debbie had told about you. Dave, some of this is going to be pretty ugly, I warned. It can't be worse than what I've imagined, I responded, upset. Only you can decide that, he replied uncomfortably. He explained he had been away in Europe for a study program during our third year, which is why we lost touch. When he returned, he had forgotten that you and Debbie had been dating before he left. After he left, Debbie started seeing other guys regularly, but none of the relationships lasted as she would end them as soon as they got serious. I think Miranda was the same, he added. Miranda told him that Debbie couldn't stay away from guys, even though she was dating you back home. She liked having a boyfriend who loved her at home and the freedom to do whatever she wanted when she was away at school. Then she betrayed you by going to Texas with Miranda over spring break. They went with a group of fraternity guys who invited them. Debbie didn't seem to care until she got back. And you didn't want anything to do with her after that? He asked. She couldn't handle it and told Miranda she would do anything to get you back. When she came back for her senior year, she told Miranda she was engaged to you. Miranda thought everything had changed, but Debbie picked up right where she left off in the spring. But how could she hide it? She had an engagement ring, he wondered. I gave her a Jeep for Christmas, and the title was in my name. She visits me almost every month, I said. She never wore her wedding ring at school and told everyone her father gave her the Jeep in May, Josh revealed. Miranda and Debbie decided to rent a house near campus with their boyfriends. Oh yes, Tom, I said, remembering the guy who answered the phone. Miranda's boyfriend was Dan. Tom was Debbie's boyfriend since the previous school year. Josh corrected me. They all lived in that house until graduation. I was shocked and upset. They all went to Florida for spring break, he added. Tom paid for Debbie's trip because they took your Jeep. I couldn't believe it. How did she and Miranda hide this from their boyfriends? I asked. They knew Debbie was seeing someone at home, but she told them it wasn't serious. Only Miranda knew it was. The night before graduation, Debbie and Tom had been together, and she told him the next morning she was getting married. He didn't take it well. That explains the angry guy at the graduation, I realized, remembering someone Debbie had avoided. She didn't want to spend the night with me after spending it with him. I felt like a fool for being deceived for so long, I confessed, tears in my eyes. Josh looked away, not knowing what to say. How could she do this for so long? I asked. We sat in silence until I managed to compose myself. Everything you told me was before our wedding. I need to find out what she's doing now. We said goodbye, and I asked him not to tell Miranda we met. I wanted Debbie to have no idea that I knew anything. Call me anytime, he said, offering a sympathetic goodbye. I drove home, and right before my shift started, Debbie called, just like always. She didn't know anything was different. She was usually friendly, and we had gone on a few dates back in college. We even got close once and stayed friends. But when I told her I met you, she became distant. I got upset and accused her and Debbie of trying to deceive you. She felt guilty and eventually told me everything. Miranda was the only person Debbie had told about you. Dave, some of this is going to be pretty rough, I warned. It can't be worse than what I've imagined, I responded, upset. Only you can judge that, he replied, clearly uncomfortable. He explained he was abroad for a semester during our third year, which is why we lost touch. By the time he returned, he had forgotten you and Debbie were dating. After he left, Debbie started seeing other guys regularly, but none of the relationships lasted as she ended them as soon as they got serious. I think Miranda was the same, he added. Miranda told him that Debbie couldn't stay away from guys, even though she was dating you back home. She liked having a boyfriend who loved her at home and the freedom to do whatever she wanted when she was away at school. Then she betrayed you by going to Texas with Miranda over spring break. They went with a group of fraternity guys who invited them. Debbie didn't think much of it until she got back. And you didn't want anything to do with her after that? He asked. She couldn't handle it and told Miranda she would do anything to get you back. When she came back for her senior year, she told Miranda she was engaged to you. Miranda thought everything had changed, but Debbie picked up right where she left off in the spring. But how could she hide it? She had an engagement ring, he wondered. I gave her a Jeep for Christmas, and the title was in my name. She visits me almost every month, I said. She never wore her wedding ring at school and told everyone her father gave her the Jeep in May, Josh revealed. Miranda and Debbie decided to rent a house near campus with their boyfriends. Oh, yes, Tom, I said, remembering the guy who answered the phone. Miranda's boyfriend was Dan. Tom was Debbie's boyfriend since the previous school year, Josh corrected me. They all lived in that house until graduation. I was shocked and upset. They all went to Florida for spring break, he added. Tom paid for Debbie's trip because they took your Jeep. I couldn't believe it. How did she and Miranda hide this from their boyfriends? I asked. They knew Debbie was seeing someone at home, but she told them it wasn't serious. Only Miranda knew it was. The night before graduation, Debbie and Tom had been together, and she told him the next morning she was getting married. He didn't take it well. That explains the angry guy at the graduation, I realized, remembering someone Debbie had avoided. She didn't want to spend the night with me after spending it with him. I felt like a fool for being deceived for so long, I confessed, tears in my eyes. Josh looked away, not knowing what to say. How could she do this for so long? I asked. We sat in silence until I managed to compose myself. Everything you told me was before our wedding. I need to find out what she's doing now. We said goodbye, and I asked him not to tell Miranda we met. I wanted Debbie to have no idea that I knew anything. Call me anytime, he said, offering a sympathetic goodbye. I drove home, and right before my shift started, Debbie called, just like always. She didn't know anything was different. He had moved to the second shift, which somehow sparked my suspicion. If it wasn't me, she'd probably be seeing someone else anyway. That might be true, but you're the most attractive woman I've ever been with, he said. "But I guess I should thank him since he's not here to do his part." After a quiet moment, John asked, "Why did you two even start dating? This doesn't seem like true love." "When I was in college, I liked having a boyfriend to come home to. Dave was one of those boyfriends. He was persistent and really nice, handsome too, and we had a strong connection. When we were together, I even thought about marriage. But when I returned to school, I wasn't so sure anymore." "But what made you commit with all those other guys around?" John asked. "Well, look at this house. He could be in a home and garden magazine. He earns way more than any guy I knew from school. Plus, he works really hard. Dave is great. He gives me everything I want, and I've got him wrapped around my finger. Once we have kids, I might not even need to work." Debbie sighed deeply. "I'll have it all. A great house, cars, kids, and a husband who earns well and switches shifts occasionally, giving me some freedom. What more could a girl want?" Hearing this, I felt like I had been punched. Was our relationship just about money and material things? As we talked about what she wanted, John suggested playfully, "Maybe we should head to the bedroom." "Okay," I thought to myself. "I've heard enough. Time to get this guy out of my house." I picked up my work phone and called home. When the phone rang, I heard Debbie whisper, "It's probably Dave. I told him not to call." John asked, "Are you going to answer?" "No, let it go to voicemail," she replied. After 4 rings, the answering machine kicked in. I left a message pretending I was still at work. "Hey, honey, you're probably not home yet. I'm still not feeling well. My boss said I could leave early, so I'll be home soon." Suddenly, Debbie sprang up, grabbed a towel, and told John, "You need to leave now." "Why? We still have time," he protested. "No, Dave could be home in 15 to 20 minutes if traffic is light. I need to clean up and make it look like I just got home." They hurriedly tidied up, and I heard her tell him to call next week before slamming the door. I heard his car leave. I sat back, listening to Debbie bustling around the house, turning on the TV and washing dishes. I sat there, thinking about my life, my marriage, and what the future held. The last thing I heard was Debbie muttering, "Dave, you ruined my evening." I wondered, is it really that bad? I sat quietly, then realized it was past midnight. The house was silent except for the porch light. I turned off the recorder, left the garage, and drove around to the front. I entered quietly, not ready to sleep. I grabbed a beer and sat outside, staring at the stars, knowing I had to resolve everything tomorrow. Feeling down, I went back inside. I kicked something by the hot tub. It was a wallet. In the kitchen light, I opened it to find John's license. I went upstairs, heard Debbie's steady breathing, and then went to sleep alone on the sofa. Inside the wallet, I found a foil packet labeled Trojan Ultra Thin. I lay down, covered myself, and fell asleep. The next morning, the shower was running. Debbie came out wrapped in a towel, surprised to see me. "What happened last night?" she asked. "The boss kept me late," I lied, saying I still felt sick. "You need to shave," she noted, touching my cheek. She tried to cheer me up, her charm as affecting as ever. I looked into her eyes, trying to find any hint of guilt or insincerity, but saw nothing. Meanwhile, things escalated between us physically. Afterward, as we lay there, she noticed something unusual. "Dave, what are you doing? Why did you use that?" she asked, noticing the condom. "This way you don't have to worry about getting pregnant by John," I replied coldly. Debbie went pale. She tried to speak but couldn't find the words. "Or maybe Craig will help you instead. Just keep him away from the beer so he can actually perform," I added harshly. "What? What are you talking about?" she finally managed. "I think you know exactly what I'm saying," I said, anger rising in my voice. "Now get out of my house." She was so stunned she rolled off the bed to the floor. She looked up at me, confused and scared. "Or maybe it will be Tom, your old college roommate," I continued sarcastically. I went over to her dresser, pulled out some of her clothes, and threw them at her. "Get dressed! You're leaving!" She sat on the edge of the bed, crying. "I don't understand. What did I do wrong?" she sobbed. "What don't you get? You lied and cheated. Get dressed now," I yelled, losing my patience. As she dressed, sobbing, I threw a pair of sandals at her. "Hurry up," I pressed. "Please, Dave, I love you. Don't do this," she pleaded. "Love? You don't know what love is," I snapped. She collapsed to the floor, crying harder. I grabbed her by the wrists, pulled her up, and started dragging her toward the door. She fell again, but I kept pulling her through the house to the side door. Outside, a taxi was waiting. "This is your ride," I told her coldly. "But my Jeep," she protested. "It's mine, in my name," I reminded her, pulling the keys from her ring and tossing them into her purse. "Now go!" I shoved her into the taxi and told the driver the address. "Make sure she doesn't come back," I added, handing him extra money. After the taxi drove off, I went back inside, feeling a mix of rage and emptiness. I grabbed a beer and sat down, trying to calm down. Everything about Debbie, every plan, it was all over. I had to decide what to do next. I began packing up her belongings, clearing out everything that reminded me of her. I found John's wallet among her things, a final reminder of her betrayal. I called his wife, Katie. "He can pick up his wallet any time," I said when she answered. "His wallet? How did you get that?" she asked, confused. "I think he lost it here last night," I replied, hinting at the truth. She laughed, thinking it was a joke, but I was serious. "It's no joke," I said. The call ended, and I sat back, the weight of the night's events heavy on my shoulders. I knew life had to move on, but that moment marked a new beginning, albeit a painful one. "Why did he take his pants off?" Katie asked. "Well, he had to take them off to get into the hot tub and be with Debbie," I replied. "Dave, this isn't funny," she said. "I told you this is not a joke. Let me talk to Debbie." "Debbie doesn't live here anymore," I said. There was a long silence on the line. Then she whispered, "Oh, God, he really—" "Oh, yes, he really did," I confirmed. "I have to go," she whispered. "Tell John to come get his wallet. I have a few words for him," I said angrily before she hung up. An hour later, I was taking another trash bag of Debbie's things to the garage when a car pulled into the driveway. I saw Sarah get out and walk toward me. She put her hands on her hips and said, "She finally did it, huh?" "Yes," I admitted reluctantly. She looked at the pile of bags and asked, "No chance?" "No chance," I said firmly. She nodded. "Have you come to pick up her things?" I asked. "No, I came to see how you are," she replied, surprising me. "Oh, I'll take all this when I go. But I really came to make sure you're done with her. And if you are, I want to put my relationship on the line," she said. "I don't understand," I said, confused. "Dave, I've been half in love with you since you started dating Debbie. When you two got back together, I told her she had to treat you right or I would. I know it's a bit early to think about dating your future ex-sister-in-law, but I just wanted you to know that I'm interested," she said. "Now, help me load her things into the car and I'll get them out of here," she added. As we loaded the car, she said, "By the way, Debbie is home now. Mom and Dad are trying to keep her from having a breakdown. Looks like getting caught has ruined her little fantasy world." She laughed, kissed me on the cheek, and left. I watched her drive away, completely puzzled. I hadn't expected this. A couple of days later, Katie came to pick up John's wallet. I played the recording for her and she cried. "I know this isn't the first time," she said, wiping away tears. "I'm pretty sure he cheated a couple of years ago with his former business partner's wife. He suddenly left the business and John couldn't explain why." Before she left, she asked for a copy of the recording. I agreed. Carl started calling almost every day, asking to meet Debbie to talk. After the fourth time, I said, not just no, but hell no. I sent him a copy of the recording. He only called once after that to apologize. I also sent a copy to Kathy and my lawyer. I heard later that Katie and John had separated, but were going through marriage counseling. I never got around to adding Debbie to the house title, and I had records and receipts for every dollar I put into it. I agreed to give her the Jeep, as there was some doubt it was a gift. Dividing a few pieces of furniture and the cash in our accounts completed the property division. The existence of the tape likely dissuaded Debbie and her lawyer from asking for more. I put the house up for sale as soon as I was sure it wouldn't be considered marital property. I didn't want to live in it anymore. I bought and refurbished it for one reason, and that reason was gone. It sold quickly, and I received a significant amount. Around the same time, the divorce was finalized. I received my electrician's license. Considering everything, I decided to return to my dream of continuing my studies. An electrical engineer with a licensed electrician is always in demand. I took a leave of absence from the factory and went back to college with the money from the house sale. I had enough to pay tuition for the remaining 3 semesters and cover basic living expenses. I continued to work 15, 20 hours a week with the partnership. With this and my savings, I could live comfortably, so I rented a condominium near the college. Coincidentally, it was the same college Sarah attended. Sarah and I continued to meet about once a week for lunch, drinks, or just to talk. She kept me informed about Debbie without me having to ask. Carl and Angela were so disappointed that she wanted to talk to me. I told Sarah to tell Debbie that I was moving on, and there was nothing she could say to change my decision. Sarah and I grew closer. I admit there was an undeniable attraction between us, and every time we met, she jokingly reminded me of her desire to start a relationship. I was getting used to the idea of starting over, and it looked very appealing. She recently suggested, flirtatiously, that we move in together to save money while we both finish our studies. I resisted, but she senses that I'm weakening. Is there a K-13 curse? If so, then I'm probably completely screwed.